As the United States is pulling out all stops to rebuild ties with Saudi Arabia to prevent the oil-rich country's overtures to China, Washington's efforts seem to have hit a roadblock, once again. This time, over Riyadh's reported decision to consider Beijing's bid to help it build a nuclear plant after America set conditions for helping the Gulf nation in its quest for nuclear power. This comes at a time when the US is trying to broker a normalization deal between its close ally Israel and Saudi Arabia as part of a larger Arab-Israel reconciliation plan to prevent China from gaining influence in the Middle East, a region once dominated by the US. Will the Joe Biden administration give in to Saudi pressure to compromise on its Cold War-era policy designed to prevent the proliferation of atomic weapons? Or risk pushing one of the world's most powerful energy exporters further into China's camp? Saudi Arabia resumed talks with the US over the past year after a dip in their ties, especially after Riyadh's refusal to cut oil production as requested by Washington to counter Russia amid the war in Ukraine. US President Biden vowed to impose consequences. However, in the months since, he has probably come to accept the hard reality of the new geopolitical landscape that Washington cannot afford to alienate powerful partners if it intends to compete with China and Russia across the globe. Saudi Arabia considered establishing diplomatic relations with Israel as part of a deal with the nuclear-armed US for civilian nuclear energy. However, US officials have said in the past that they would share nuclear power technology only if the agreement prevents enrichment of uranium or reprocessing of plutonium made in reactors so as to prevent Saudi from building nuclear weapons. Last week, The Wall Street Journal reported that Saudi Arabia was now considering an offer from China to build its debut reactors, with potentially far fewer strings attached. Saudi officials cited in the Wall Street Journal report said that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was prepared to move ahead with the Chinese company soon, if talks with the US failed. Saudi Arabia has built closer relations with China over the past year. In March, China brokered a resumption of ties between Saudi Arabia and its arch-regional foe Iran. China and Saudi Arabia have extensive trade relations in the energy field, with Beijing being the world's biggest importer of crude oil and Riyadh being the biggest exporter. Chinese President Xi Jinping visited the kingdom in December last year, in what was described by China's foreign ministry as an epoch-making milestone in the history of the development of China-Arab relations. At the same time, Saudi officials acknowledged in the Wall Street Journal report that exploring the nuclear issue with China was a way of goading the Biden administration to compromise on its non-proliferation requirements. Days after the news was reported, a top U.S. delegation is slated to travel to Riyadh this week to meet with Saudi counterparts in order to discuss a potential normalization agreement, as per a report by the Times of Israel. There are clear advantages for the Saudi to work with Beijing, the breakaway global leader in new nuclear construction. China has become largely self-sufficient in reactor design and construction, as well as other aspects of the fuel cycle. Unlike the US, China maintains strong ties with Russia, the #1 nuclear exporter and top source of enriched uranium worldwide. And, perhaps most relevant, China is not expected to require Saudi Arabia, a country that owes its vast wealth and geopolitical influence to its energy exports, to forswear developing its own domestic industry to mine, enrich and recycle reactor fuel. Currently, China has 21 nuclear reactors under construction, which is 2.5 times more nuclear reactors under construction than any other country. These 21 reactors will have a capacity for generating more than 21 gigawatts of electricity. Comparatively, the United States currently has 1 nuclear reactor under construction, the 4th reactor at the Vogtle power plant in Georgia, which will be able to generate just over 1 gigawatt. Even as the US is trying to catch up and regain some of its former dominance in the nuclear space, Washington's nuclear policy seems to be grounded on the belief that if the US doesn't help build a country's first nuclear reactor, it simply won't happen. Therefore, dismissing the rising nuclear powers such as China, as pointed out in a HuffPost article. Amid the nuclear power struggle between China and the US, a country like Saudi Arabia, which does not have any nuclear power facilities, lags behind and may be forced to pick the low-hanging fruit, which at the moment seems to be Beijing.